For centuries, the keyboard instruments of Europe were bound by a frustrating, unyielding mechanical limitation. The dominant domestic instrument of the era was the harpsichord, a marvel of woodwork and wire. Yet the harpsichord possessed a fundamental artistic flaw that restricted the emotional expression of the player. Its internal mechanism relied on a small quill that plucked the taut metal string whenever a key was depressed. Because the quill simply plucked the wire with a fixed force, pressing the key harder yielded no increase in volume. A musician could not whisper a soft melody, nor could they command a roaring crescendo through their touch alone. In Florence, Italy, an extraordinary craftsman named Bartolomeo Cristofori set out to break this acoustic barrier. Employed by the wealthy Prince Ferdinando de' Medici, Cristofori possessed both the resources and the brilliant mind required for experimentation. He realized that to achieve variable volume, the strings must be struck with hammers rather than plucked with quills. This simple conceptual shift introduced a massive, seemingly insurmountable engineering nightmare. If a hammer remained pressed against the string after striking it, the dampening effect of the wood would immediately kill the sound. Conversely, if the hammer bounced too wildly, it would strike the string a second time, muddying the musical note entirely. The hammer needed to fly toward the string, strike it in a fraction of a second, and then instantly escape from the player's control. This crucial concept is known in mechanical engineering as the escapement mechanism. Cristofori spent years refining this tiny lever, carving miniature joints out of fine hardwoods to ensure absolute precision. He called his completed invention the gravicembalo col piano e forte, meaning a harpsichord with soft and loud. At the heart of this machine lay a small, intermediate lever that amplified the upward motion of the key press. As the key is pushed downward, it tilts the intermediate lever, which forces the hopper to push the hammer upward. Just before the hammer reaches the string, the hopper hits a fixed regulating block, causing it to slip out from beneath the hammer. Free from the key's direct linkage, the hammer flies forward on pure inertia to strike the string. It rebounds instantly, falling back down into a catch mechanism even while the player keeps the key held down. This single stroke of genius allowed the string to ring out with perfect acoustic clarity. To complete his system, Cristofori also developed an independent damper mechanism for each individual key. When the player finally releases the key, the damper drops back down onto the wire, instantly silencing the vibration. Suddenly, the musician possessed an unprecedented level of dynamic expression over their sound. A gentle, soft touch meant a slow-moving hammer and a quiet, intimate tone. A fierce strike accelerated the hammer rapidly, producing a loud, powerful acoustic explosion. Despite the utter brilliance of this design, the musical world did not initially embrace Cristofori's revolutionary instrument. Traditional harpsichordists found the new action far too heavy and difficult to control accurately. The early strings were thin and held under low tension, making the sound somewhat muted compared to a loud harpsichord. Cristofori passed away in 1731, never realizing that his mechanical blueprint would alter the course of human history. However, his groundbreaking designs soon migrated across the Alps into Germany. A famous organ builder named Gottfried Silbermann obtained copies of Cristofori's designs and began creating his own versions. Silbermann presented one of his improved models to the legendary composer Johann Sebastian Bach. Bach initially criticized the instrument, claiming the high notes were far too weak and difficult to play. Stung by the critique, Silbermann worked tirelessly to reinforce the frame and improve the escapement tolerances. Years later, Bach finally praised the refined instrument, cementing the piano's place among musical royalty. As composition evolved, composers began demanding even greater speed, power, and responsiveness from the mechanism. Cristofori's original action was a masterpiece, but it lacked the rapid-fire repetition capabilities required for modern music. If a pianist struck the same key twice in rapid succession, the mechanism would jam, choking the second note entirely. To unlock the true potential of the instrument, the entire mechanical architecture needed to be completely reinvented. This radical reinvention materialized as a complex labyrinth of wood, felt, and leather working in perfect unison. To understand this marvel, we must trace the kinetic journey initiated by a pianist's single touch. The sequence begins the exact millisecond a finger presses down on the wooden key lever. As the front of the key descends, the back of the key pivots upward like a perfectly balanced seesaw. This rear movement immediately activates the capstan screw, a small brass cylinder mounted on the tail of the key. The weapon acts as the heart of the modern repetition action, acting as a secondary lever system. Simultaneously, the back of the key lifts the damper lever, raising the heavy felt damper off the tense wire strings. Free from the choking grip of the felt, the strings are now primed to vibrate without restriction. Back inside the action, the ascending weapon carries a vertical wooden component known as the jack. The jack directly transmits the kinetic force of the pianist's hand into the roller of the hammer shank. This contact propels the heavy, felt-headed hammer upward toward the awaiting string overhead. If the jack remained locked beneath the hammer would smash into the string and mute it instantly. To prevent this fatal flaw, a tiny wooden button waits silently along the path of travel. Just millimeters before the hammer strikes the string, the protruding heel of the jack collides with this regulating button. This impact trips the mechanism, forcing the top of the jack to pivot backward and slip completely out from under the hammer knuckle. This is the historic moment of escapement, where the hammer is suddenly cut loose from the key assembly. Free from mechanical restraint, the hammer acts as a pure projectile, traveling purely on kinetic energy. The compressed wool felt of the hammer slams violently into the high-tension steel strings. Energy transfers instantly, and the steel strings erupt into a violent, beautifully complex acoustic wave. The contact lasts for only a fraction of a millisecond before gravity and physics take over. As the hammer rebounds, it must be caught safely to prevent it from bouncing back up to strike the string a second time. A wedge-shaped piece of wood covered in rough leather, known as the back check, rises to meet the falling piece. The tail of the hammer slides securely against the high-friction surface of the back check, stopping mid-air. While the hammer is held in this suspended state, a specialized spring inside the weapon goes to work. This repetition spring exerts a gentle upward force on the repetition lever, keeping it primed for action. If the pianist releases the key even a fraction of an inch, the back check moves away to release the hammer tail. Instantly, the repetition spring pushes the repetition lever upward, lifting the entire hammer a tiny distance. This microscopic clearance allows a small spring to snap the jack right back underneath the hammer knuckle. This ingenious double escapement mechanism allows a note to be restruck before the key has fully returned to its top position. It is this specific engineering triumph that granted 19th-century virtuosos the power of lightning-fast note repetitions. When the pianist finally removes their hand entirely, the heavy wooden key level sinks back down to absolute rest. At the rear of the key, the damper assembly plunges downward under its own weighted gravity. The thick felt immediately absorbs the physical vibrations, silencing the acoustic sound wave in a whisper. Multiply this entire sequence by 88, and you begin to grasp the sheer scope of the grand piano action. Over 10,000 distinct moving pieces of wood, wire, felt, and leather must operate flawlessly in this grand dance. Every single lever must be regulated to tolerances measured within fractions of a millimeter to ensure perfect touch response. This complex mechanical choreography represents one of the highest peaks of human industrial design and mechanical engineering. Yet this breathtaking mechanical dance is entirely useless without a powerful medium to amplify its kinetic output. The fleeting energy of the striking felt hammer must somehow be converted into a massive, room-shaking acoustic resonance. Beneath the delicate wooden action lies a terrifying realm of structural violence, where tens of thousands of pounds of tension threaten to tear the entire instrument apart at any given second. The smoldering ruins of Bubba's village lay silent under a suffocating shroud of ash and thick gray smoke. Ghoul stood entirely motionless amidst the blackened debris, his tiny body trembling violently as the fiery cyclone of his rage slowly dissipated. Beneath the surface of his green skin, a volatile and agonizing heat throbbed erratically like a ticking bomb. Nearby, the disfigured and broken corpse of the butcher Zeke lay heavily across the cracked, blood-stained concrete. Kalana stared blankly at the staggering scene of defeat, her pride as an officer completely shattered by the swift execution of her invincible captain. Across the ruined plaza, the decrepit Envy, Captain Shuya-un laughed maniacally as he continued to forcibly rip the glowing essence away from the Elder Spirit Beast. Elder Guron roared out in absolute torment as the golden scales coating his massive draconic spirit beast were painfully shaved away from his physical body. Hearing the agonizing cries of his beloved grandfather figure, Ghoul snapped out of his daze as dark clouds of unbridled anger flooded his vision once more. Pushing his small body beyond its physical limits, Ghoul charged forward like a ballistic missile and delivered a concentrated fire-retardant kick directly into the unbreakable defensive dome. The powerful impact shattered the spell entirely, disintegrating its very essence, and sending a violent concussive shockwave rippling across the entire war zone. Shuya-un grits his teeth in pure irritation as he was forced to abruptly stop his extraction process to dodge the incoming young blood orc. Though freed from the platform's embrace, Elder Guron collapsed heavily onto the hard dirt, coughing up blood as his stolen energy left him dangerously weakened. Reappearing instantly through the thick smoke cloud, Ghoul swung his leg downward with maximum momentum to crush the Envy Captain's skull. Shuya-un narrowly anticipated the high-speed assault, planting his massive feet into the concrete to deliver a devastating counterkick directly into Ghoul's unprotected side. The incredible force hurled the young blood orc through the air like a discarded ragdoll, sending him crashing painfully across multiple stone structures before tumbling into the dirt. Ghoul lay weakly among the lifeless bodies of his fallen brethren, their bound and chained forms floating in wide pools of unavenged crimson blood. Inside his fractured mind, the ancient entity Ahmad roared from his dark throne, fiercely commanding the young orc to rise and unleash true slaughter. Trembling on the verge of tears, Ghoul whimpered silently to the spirit, admitting his absolute exhaustion and inability to defeat such an overpowering monster alone. Shuya-un marched forward slowly and menacingly, his newly stolen draconic scales faintly glimmering along his purple skin as his presence warped the very earth below him. Recalling the cruel, agonizing image of his grandfather being skinned alive, a serene yet terrifying stillness enveloped Ghoul as his hatred crystallized into absolute focus. Bursting forward like a high-velocity bullet from a barrel, Ghoul launched an unrelenting second wave of high-speed martial strikes against the demonic captain. Their powerful attacks generated an explosive sonic boom that completely cleared the central field of all remaining dust and low-level stragglers. Ghoul successfully landed a heavy, concentrated kick into the demon's chest, forcing an ugly expression of pure agony onto Shuya-un's face before the captain violently punched him back into the rubble. Recognizing his inability to fully digest the Golden Dragon's stolen power in active combat, the Envy Captain urgently called for his lieutenant to prepare an immediate tactical withdrawal. Using a decorative magical scepter, the demonic portal mage ripped open the very fabric of space to reveal a swirling dark dimensional gateway. Refusing to let the perpetrators escape without consequence, Ghoul propelled himself into the air like a meteor, screaming a guttural roar of unbridled fury. The dimensional portal snapped shut instantly, leaving Ghoul's catastrophic meteoric strike to crash heavily into nothing but empty, unyielding stone ground. Operating purely on broken instincts, Ghoul repeatedly slammed his head against the hard dirt in bitter frustration, letting out a devastating scream of complete defeat. Within the dense smoke, the remaining abandoned mages of the Envy army panicked, desperately scrambling to find a safe route away from the feral blood orc. Sensing their weak movements instantly, Ghoul vanished and reappeared with lightning speed, executing the fleeing stragglers with swift, unmerciful concussive force. High above on a rugged mountain peak, an enigmatic demon with massive black wings and a grotesque tail watched the entire massacre with sinister amusement. Spreading his leathery wings wide, the scout dove into a steep freefall before soaring off into the night sky to deliver this crucial information to the demon lord. Back on the field, Elder Guron's breathing grew dangerously shallow, his internal organs completely failing as the golden aura around his body began to dim forever. Activating her soul-cast spear weapon, Kalana prepared to pierce the vulnerable child orc to salvage what remained of her army's fading military pride. Suddenly, a devastating and invisible blade whistled through the morning air, tearing through the landscape with terrifying precision. Elder Guron lunged forward with his last ounce of warrior tenacity, shielding Ghoul entirely as a massive dark blade lodged deep into his old chest. Out from the parting smoke stepped a mysterious hooded figure known across distant lands as the dangerous bounty target, the Forsaken One. Placing his heavy hand on Ghoul's small head inside his mind, the dying elder whispered a final emotional request for the dragon god to guard the young boy. As the crimson aura dissipated completely, Ghoul reverted to his normal green form, passing out instantly onto the cold ground from total physical trauma. Expertly cleaning the blade with a single swift motion, the Forsaken One casually sheathed his sword, completely ignoring the arrival of the elite Dark Elf Night Walkers. Infuriated by his nonchalant disrespect, a nimble Dark Elf assassin named Ranz lunged from behind, only for his multi-purpose dagger to shatter into a million pieces. Proclaiming that his holy mission against the dragon god was successfully finished, the powerful swordsman leaped into the dense mountains, leaving the reinforcement crews completely speechless. Arriving just a moment too late, Ghoul's distraught mother, Ghoulin, fell to her knees before the lifeless bodies of her family, her agonizing screams filling the valley. The elven Nightwalkers solemnly gathered the fallen orc heroes, neatly organizing their bodies out of profound respect for their valiant final defense. Placing her aunt's beloved meat cleaver atop a ceremonial wooden platform, Ghoulin watched with stone-cold eyes as the massive funeral pyres were lit under the bright moon. Waking up to witness his world reduced to floating ash, Ghoul felt the staggering weight of his failure slowly morphing into a pure, cold hatred directed solely at Shuya-un. Far away in the demonic kingdom, Captain Shuya-un emerged from a pool of dark magic, his physical body radically transformed into a younger, heavily buffed warrior state. Days later, the slow-moving wagon carrying the traumatized remnants of the tribe finally approached the towering defensive stone gates of the grand city of Boot. Standing tall before his citizens, Chieftain Dak Tunder raised his massive scarred fist, loudly swearing an uncompromising war cry to completely annihilate the demon race for their atrocities. Yet, as the roaring army prepared for a catastrophic clash of empires, an ancient volatile tremor rattled deep within the cast-iron foundation of the city, hinting at an unresolved violence that threatened to tear the world apart from the inside out. As the echoes of that intense structural tension fade, we find ourselves standing at the pinnacle of modern acoustic engineering. This final chapter of the instrument's journey explores how centuries of trial and error have culminated in a perfect synthesis of art and science. Today, the modern manufacturer must balance the rigid laws of physics with the organic unpredictability of natural materials. Specialized artisans begin the process by selecting only the finest wood with perfectly straight grain patterns. Each piece of spruce destined for the soundboard must be dried naturally for several years to ensure dimensional stability. Once cured, the wood is precisely planed and glued together to form a single, expansive, resonant diaphragm. Meanwhile, metallurgy has advanced to create rim structures capable of withstanding immense crushing forces. The outer rim is formed by laminating multiple layers of premium hardwood together in a single, continuous press. Giant hydraulic presses exert tons of pressure to force the stiff wooden laminations into that iconic, elegant curve. This structural foundation ensures that the energy of the strings is reflected back into the soundboard rather than absorbed by the frame. Inside the action, modern builders have introduced cutting-edge materials to combat the vulnerability of traditional wood to humidity. Carbon fiber and advanced composites are now utilized by some makers to create completely unwarpable components. These space-age materials respond instantly to the pianist's touch, completely immune to seasonal weather changes. Yet, despite these digital-era innovations, the final voice of the instrument remains entirely dependent on human hands. A master voicer steps forward, armed only with a specialized tool containing several fine needles. The technician delicately pricks the dense wool felt of each hammer to adjust its inner resilience. If the felt is too hard, the tone will sound harsh and metallic, lacking any musical depth. If the felt is too soft, the sound becomes muffled and lifeless, failing to project across a hall. Through decades of trained auditory memory, the master voicer sculpts a balanced tonal palette across all 88 keys. Next comes the rigorous process of concert regulation, aligning every mechanical variance to a fraction of a millimeter. Small paper shims are placed underneath the key pins to ensure a perfectly uniform height across the entire bed. Every single screw in the intricate whip and assembly is adjusted to eliminate any lost motion. This meticulous calibration ensures that the instrument behaves as an absolute extension of the artist's nervous system. Finally, the tuning pins are turned to bring the massive string tension into perfect mathematical temperament. The technician applies subtle pressure, feeling the friction of the dense multi-laminated wood block holding the pin. With a definitive, masterful stroke, the instrument is brought to absolute harmonic perfection. The fully completed masterwork is now ready to leave the factory floor and claim its place on the world stage. It represents a lineage of human ingenuity, stretching back over 300 years to Cristofori's workshop. What began as a simple desire to add dynamics to the harpsichord has evolved into mankind's most complex mechanical instrument. It has survived the rise of electronic synthesizers, digital computers, and shifting cultural landscapes. Because nothing in the digital realm can truly replicate the visceral movement of physical mass moving through space. The modern concert grand remains the undisputed king of the musical world. As we look to the future, the core mechanical architecture of the instrument will remain unchanged. Future generations of craftspeople will still spend decades mastering the subtle arts of voicing and regulation. And future pianists will continue to discover new worlds of emotional expression hidden within these keys. The great synthesis of cast iron, aged spruce, soft wool, and taut steel stands fully realized. Every element has been optimized by human genius to achieve a state of pure artistic grace. All historical conflicts of mechanics, tension, and materials have found their definitive resolution in this modern marvel. The piano stands not just as a tool for making music, but as an eternal monument to our collective quest for perfection. As the final note is struck, it resonates outward into eternity, cementing the enduring legacy of mechanical mastery forever.